Hello, ahlan wa marhaban. Welcome to our third WorldKidLit live event and our first panel in a new series, each one of which will focus on a different country or language. This first one is about Arabic literature, which you can find in many different countries, of course. The two earlier panels are now on YouTube if you want to go look at them. And this panel will also be archived on YouTube in case you missed part of it or want to go back and watch the whole thing over again. So today I will be joined by 4 different brilliant and award-winning panelists who have worked in all different areas with regards to Arabic literature for young readers. And I'm also joined by Mohini Gupta, who makes everything happen in the background, and Ruth Ahmed Kemp, who is looking for your questions on the Facebook Live event right now. At any point that you have a question, you don't need to hold it back or try to keep it in mind. You can go ahead and type it in straight away, and Ruth will bring those questions together, and in the last 20 minutes of this panel event, feed them these questions to us. So thank you all so much for coming today. And I'm going to introduce the panelists sort of one by one, and then they will talk a bit about their work with Arabic literature for young readers. We're going to start with Susanne Abou Ghaida, who is a brilliant academic doing very important research into Arabic young adult literature. She's also worked with IBI, the International Board on Books for Young People, with organizing prizes and reviewing children's literature. And actually, I'm just going to let Susanne tell you about herself.
Unmuting myself. So first of all, thank you for putting this all together. I just want to talk very briefly about my sort of work experience, because before I was an academic and a researcher, Fatma's joined us. Like Marcia said, I used to work on the practical side of things. So I got my start working on, it was a project funded by the Swedish government. It was managed by the Anna Lindh Foundation, which is based in Alexandria, Egypt. But we worked in, well, we were supposed to work in 5 countries, but by the time I joined up, the conflict had started in Syria. So that involved, organizing prizes, exhibitions, workshops, doing research, and it was really a very good induction into Arabic literature. I mean, I did know a bit about it from school, but you're in a place where the books are coming to you, and you're working directly with publishers, and sometimes being on the receiving end, because you're working with prizes and book selection, on the receiving end of their anger and, drama. And that's not I understand that's not a very usual situation, because I do feel that Arabic literature, good Arabic literature for children, is sort of the best kept secret. So unless you're in that sort of situation where you have the chance to meet people, the books are coming to you, you don't necessarily need to buy everything, you go to book fairs, it's hard to really understand how much good literature is out there. So that was my start. I learned a lot from that, and then I worked with IBI, which organizes the Slot Award. I was kind of tangentially involved with that, but we also had workshops for authors and illustrators. We worked with the Goethe Institute to do a project called Made in the Emirates, so to sort of work on homegrown talent, if you will, even though other activities weren't necessarily just limited to the Emiratis. And also because the Emirates has 2 major book fairs that are good places to go if you want books from all different Arab countries. And book fairs are really important, as we're finding out in this COVID era, where we feel like, we don't have a sense of direction because we're not able to see the books. And then after that, I did my master's. Almost all my assignments were on Arabic books. I did it in London at University of Northampton. Of course, I needed to have the books with me because, good luck finding Arabic books in the UK, or you don't get much of a variety. My master's was on picture books and the adult-child power dynamic, and that's sort of an interest I've retained. And now, well, I've just finished my PhD that was on young adult literature, and it involved looking at the books for sure, and 2 books by 2 authors on this panel. So 1 book by Cappuccino by Fatima, and Lughz Ayn Sakr by Taghreed, which I think should be translated for sure. I really love that book. We're doing work with readers because we don't have tons of reader response research. So Hadil's research in that area is also really important. And just to mention sort of two things I've done on the side so that I don't take up too much time. One of them is an online magazine I started with two friends, Hala, who's a common friend with Fatima. I mean, it's been, which is sort of like doing book reviews and interviews with people and also different articles. That's been inactive for a while because we've just gotten really busy, but maybe one day we will sort of revive that. And finally, another project that I did with my supervisor who has a connection with Egypt, we took some books which we happened to have at hand. So one of them was Al-Amma Osha by Fatima. I love that book. Another one was Takshira by Nasiba Al-Zaibi, illustrated by Hatim Ali. Another one was by Amal Farah, which is Muthallath wa Da'ira, Walid Tahir's The Black Dot, and Matil Chev, Kannas, The Street Sweeper. So we took those books, we went into Scottish schools. In one school, nobody spoke a word of Arabic, yet when we tried those books, they got the story. Like the only issue we had was with The Black Dot, it's a bit too long. But other than that, and that's the ultimate test of a picture book, that the illustrations really do a very good role of telling the story. So that was, and we've published a bit about that. I think Fatima has a copy of that article. And I think that's it. That's all the time I'll take.
Thank you so much, Susanne. That's a fantastic introduction to many different things. And I would just say for any publishers who are watching, these two books that Susanne talks about having done research with for her PhD thesis, The Mystery of the Falcon's Eye and Fatima's Cappuccino. If you're interested in a sample, please email worldkidlit@gmail.com. Next up is Hadil Ghoneim, who is the winner of this year's Best Book Prize from the Etisalat Award for Arabic Children's Literature. And I believe also translation rights may still be available. She's also written YA, picture books for young readers, and I learned from her website recently, was the translator of the Geronimo Stilton series into Arabic. Thank you, Hadil.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Marcia. It's great to be with you guys, all of you. This is a great panel. I've always wanted to meet all of you. Yeah, my work with Arabic children's literature has always been me trying to mix my hobby into my serious work and gradually making this kind of pleasure or secret hobby into legitimate work. So I always loved folk tales, for example, and early on, while I was working in a serious magazine and posing as a serious grown-up, I was saying folk tales are so important. It's cultural identity. We should be gathering them and doing stuff. And also, when I did my master's degree, I kind of smuggled in my dissertation to be about Mickey Mouse magazine and how we were consuming it in Egypt, sort of localized it, Egyptianized it, the experience itself. But then after that, I did have my chance of actually entering the field and being introduced to the professional side of children's book publishing and production when I worked for Dar al-Shuruk as an editor for about 2 years. And it was during that boom, during that, I remember the Lynx Foundation research or a project, and we had our own little boom in Egypt in the industry. So in a matter of 2 years, I did travel to the book fairs like Bologna, and also locally, it was a chance to edit many books, translate, and even author. So, and it was a fun thing. I found out that actually I enjoy storifying for children. I enjoy simplifying, you know, I like the challenge of bringing a difficult event, a difficult feeling, a difficult idea, and making it clear and simple and a story, fun. So it's a challenge to me, and I think it, personally, this is what I like to read. This is how I like to read, even if it's science, history, anything. If it's told in a nice story, I like it. And of course, engaging children is one of the most difficult things, and it's challenging. When you do, it feels good. For example, I enjoyed storifying Naguib Mahfouz's biography, an author that I love. That was one of the very first things I worked on. Later, I found myself in realistic fiction with A Year in Inna, which actually made me and my protagonist, we actually got into a lot of in the countryside in southern Egypt. I found myself dealing with a lot of issues of discrimination and difficult issues, but it was really a wonderful journey. And I was like, I did a lot of research with anthropological texts and all that. And that's how my next project is actually the book that you see right now that just won the prize this year. But I worked on it right after A Year in Inna because I wanted to break from realistic fiction, and I really wanted to go into fantasy world and magic and just go out there. And it was fun. It was another challenge. I loved playing with this monstrous text and with all the monsters, and I tried to make it a little kinder. It was kinder to women, kinder to kids, make it available and accessible to kids, because and just play with it. I'm looking forward to doing more. I think the attention from the award will probably help me with collaborations that I've always been looking forward to. Graphic novels, mysteries, again, using those collaborations. Sometimes I have still friends who work on, because their work is maybe takes them to interesting places because of their anthropological work or ethnographies or histories that they're working on. I keep saying, hey, this is so interesting, let's do that. Why don't we bring this to children? So this is the kind of thing that I like. I'm not bored of folk tales, I'm not bored of classics. I still want to do more of that. And so, yeah, here we go.
Thank you so much, Hadil. Next, I want to introduce Taghreed and Najjar, a pioneering and award-winning publisher and author who has written books for children from ages 1 to 101. You can read a number of her books in English translation, although sadly not yet any of her YA novels. Please, worldkidlit@gmail.com for samples. But The Hool was recently chosen by Taghreed, which is in translation from Interlinked Books, was recently chosen as one of the Chicago Public Library's best of the best of the year 2020. Taghreed, it's you.
Thank you, Marcia. And I'm really very glad to be with all of you here. And thank you for organizing this webinar. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Where do I start now? I've been writing for children now for over 40 years. So it's really been a very long and bumpy ride, but kind of fun also. I always feel that I'm very lucky to be in this profession, to be a writer, and I enjoy what I'm doing, and it's really a passion that I have. But when I started in the 70s. So my journey into writing is also like the history of what happened with Arabic literature in the Arab world. When I started, everything, in Jordan, there was no established publishing industry at all. I mean, especially for children's books, maybe there were a few publishers otherwise. And after I graduated, I felt this was my dream, to become a writer and to write children's books, Arabic children's books. So in the area, there were two publishing houses that stood out. One was Dar al-Fatah al-Arabi, a Palestinian publishing house in Beirut, and another was the Iraqi publishing house associated with the Ministry of Culture. So I was really trying myself out as a writer, to think of myself as a writer, and I sent my text to Dar al-Fatah al-Arabi, and when they accepted 3 of my texts, I was over the moon. And suddenly it became a reality, you know, my dream of becoming a writer. So there it was, the feeling that I could do it and I can be a writer. And I, you know, from that point on, you know, I was really stuck with this idea and took it on. But of course, as you all know, in our Arab world, slowly in the 70s, the civil war in Lebanon and then in Iraq, war and all that. So these two projects also were at risk at that time. And in Jordan, I wanted to try something in Jordan, but that was also very hard because, as I said, there were no illustrators that you could go to. There were no printing presses, even color printing presses were very new at that time, and no designers, nothing to really use and become a writer. But I managed to publish one book. My first book that I did was with a project. And that also helped me a lot because since I couldn't find an illustrator, I illustrated the book myself. It was called Safwan al-Pahlawan. And I realized also that wasn't enough to publish a book and print it. You have to sell it. And there was the whole process. So I was almost selling the book one by one to each person on their own. But after that, after a few years, I started teaching. And I chose to teach the age group that I was writing to. And I enjoyed that part. I taught for 5 years. And it was with a school that was very understanding and cooperative. And, you know, I was teaching first grade. And I wanted, they didn't have material, reading material. So I said, wow, this is an opportunity. Here, I want to be a writer, and here are children who want books. So I started writing books for my school, my classmates, the children in my class. And I decided to use, like every month, I would write a story and give to them, but I would choose one of the students to be the protagonist. And I illustrated the books, coloring book style, and then there were stencil machines then, so we'd stencil the stories and give each child a story to color and read. And that really gave me a lot of feedback from the kids and from the parents, and encouraged me to try harder to find a publisher. So I looked for a publisher, and finally I convinced, arm twisted almost, one publisher to try and publish the books. And the agreement was as such, you know, I would give him the book, but he wasn't an illustrator, you know, a publisher of children's books. So he said, to publish your book, I have to get the book to him illustrated. And of course, I have to pay for the illustrations. I have to find an editor. I have to do everything and just give him the book ready for print. I was very happy to do that because I had finally found a publisher to do it. And then after that, my dues were 10% of the print run. So in my case, it was like 200 books, where I also had to sell, and this is how I got my dues. But this was really, I have to thank this publisher because he taught me how to become a publisher. And after a few books of that, I founded my own publishing house. I'm telling you all this story because people ask, sometimes they don't understand, how come you're a writer and a publisher, why is that? And that is why. So I established a Salwa publishing house I founded. And this is the story of a Salwa publishing house. And the books that I wrote with the students have become classics in our publishing house. We published them as the Best Friends series. There are 12 of them, and they're still very popular with kids now. At that point, you know, things began to get better. A lot of people in our area started getting interested in children's books. And many publishers, illustrators started happening. Of course, technology also helped, like now we're all from different countries. So you could really get an illustrator from another country. You don't have to, you know, to travel there or see the illustrator from another country. And that helped a bit. But the focus mainly was on picture books. and nobody was coming near young adult books for the reason books. It was difficult economically, and also nobody knew what to do with the children books. Too many taboos of what you should do and what you should say and what you shouldn't write in children's books. So nobody wanted to go near there. But finally, I think Samah Idris in Lebanon was the one who broke he was the first one to write Al-Malja, and I think he inspired a lot of writers to do the same. He wrote a young adult novel about, the civil war in Lebanon, something real, something that happened and meant a lot to young adults. And I think after that, the ball started rolling and people started experimenting. Fatima followed with Fatim, a really lovely book about that. At that time, I was still thinking that my niche was picture books. But then one day, I wanted to write a book about cancer, and it started as a picture book. But then I saw that it needed a lot more, and I decided to take the step and write a longer book, like a novella. And I did that with a lot of trepidation. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to be successful at that. But thankfully, the book was very well received and it was even shortlisted for an award. And that gave me the courage to continue. And now I have here I have them all near, stack of my novels. And funnily enough, all of them were shortlisted, and one of them actually last year won the Etisalat Award. So what I'm saying that you should all try something new sometimes, not be afraid not to try. And I think that's all. Hope we can talk about the problems with young adult literature and the taboos and categorization. We have lots of subject to talk about. Thank you.
Thanks, Taghreed. So finally, the great Fatima Sharafeddine coming to us from Beirut, one of the most celebrated, award-winning and prolific authors of Arabic children's literature, written more than 130 books, translated to more than 12 languages, including English. And I remember when Fatim came out, and I remember how much I loved that book. And Fatima. Don't forget to,
Yes. Hello, nice to see everybody here, and welcome to every other person who is listening to us and we don't see them. I'm the opposite of Taghreed. I started as a teacher, and then I did my master's in early childhood education, focused on children's literature, not knowing I will ever write for children. It was not in my mind. And then I did a master's in modern Arabic literature, and the two degrees together led to something that I had never thought about. So I worked a lot with children. I taught Arabic a lot, many years in the US. And then my kids were growing and I was looking for good books for them to read. And that was late 90s. So I wouldn't find real good books that would be equivalent to the books I read to them in the US and later on in Europe. So I decided to do something about it. First, I thought it was a conscious decision, but when I started, I realized that that is the only way I can express myself with. So I found my path, if you want, by chance. And it was like if you had shaken a bottle of, let's say, Pepsi, and then it poured. And that's why I think I'm very productive since I started. Of course, the course of writing, I started about 15 to 16 years ago. And I'm running, I'm not stopping. And I have taught myself a lot. I took a lot of workshops in the beginning. And then I decided to play with the language, like you were saying. Arabic language is an elastic language. I think it's a very athletic language. So I wanted to address the children with a playful language. I didn't want to use the classical Arabic that we read as children, and that the books that existed in the market at the time were written with, and they were translations more than there were, you know, genuine Arabic writing. So I wanted to do something about the language. I think that's what I think made the children like my books, and the publishers, of course, because I was reaching out not only to the needs and likes of the children, but also to getting to them, you know, with a language that they liked and they understood. So I wrote a lot through the years. First, I started writing for ages 3 to 6, and then I thought, okay, we don't have baby books originally written in Arabic. I did that. And then, okay, after 6, 7, we don't have, you know, a lot of literature. So I moved up until I'm writing novels now for young adults. I did some biographies, like the Ibn Sina, Ibn Battuta, Ibn Rushd series. I did poetry books, I did rhyming books, and most of my books are dealing with social psychological issues, I think. I mean, of course, there are lots of silly books just for fun, but also especially my young adult books, I can't write fantasy or science fiction, or I really want to deal with real issues that kids are facing these days. So this is in general, and now maybe we can, you know, talk about more issues dealing with language and taboos and all of these things.
Okay, I just want to, because everybody has mentioned these very different paths into, I asked everybody to share their questions with us, and we're going to start out with questions from each other to each other. And Susanne had a question saying that there's not a great deal of support for new writers and illustrators and independent publishers, although they do continue to emerge in Arab countries. So, you know, from a process of trial and error. And the question is, how can newcomers be supported, or do you have advice for people who are just entering? And Fatima, I'm going to throw the question right back at you. Don't forget to unmute though.
Yes, sorry. Well, how to support newcomers, that's basically what I have been doing in the past few years. I travel around, before the Corona times, travel around the Arab countries to give workshops, different kinds of workshops for grown-ups, you know, for young people who want to write for children. I think we have a gap in the Arab countries where we don't have a specialization in universities about creative writing for young people, let alone illustration. You know, there's one university in Lebanon, Susanne, correct me if I'm wrong, the Alba, that gives one course in illustration. So we don't even have that available for the new illustrators to focus, you know, to know the rules and about illustrating for children. So I think for now, the best way is to attend workshops, and there are some, I'm sure there are some available workshops online now. I give workshops online for anybody. Now I'm doing it with schools children in Dubai, actually. So there's always a way, and I always tell newcomers to read a lot in all the languages they know, all kinds of books, good or bad, or so that they form their own opinion about the right way of, for them to go in their path.
Thank you so much. So another question from Susanne that I think does get at some of these taboo issues as well as other things was how well Arabic children's books travel from one Arab country to another, and whether there's a fear of content being too local or not a good fit from a book written in Palestine to be sold in the Emirates, or a book written in Lebanon to be sold in Morocco. And Taghreed, how do books travel between Arab countries?
I don't think this is very much of a problem, but let's talk about books for different ages. I mean, books as picture books, there isn't much difference in different countries, even different Arab countries, or even outside, the Arab language. Young adults also, I think it's important. They're different, but in my opinion, they are accepted everywhere because the children now and young adults are open to what is happening in all parts of the world. They're also open to that in Arab countries. And I tried that with some of my novels when I went to Tunis and discussed one of my novels with them. I didn't find that there was any kind of difficulty in understanding because of the local. And anyway, this is what it's all about. We're talking about diversity of books in different languages. So let's talk about diversity of Arabic books in different regions. So an Egyptian book should be very accessible to a Lebanese or to a Jordanian or a Palestinian.
Great, thank you so much. Now, of course, if anybody else wants to jump in on any question, go ahead. Hadil has her mouth open. Go ahead and unmute.
Well, since I have the shortest career, I can talk about supporting, how can you support writers and illustrators and this industry. And because I've been living in the US for the past few years or several years, I really find something like an association, like the Association for Children's Writers and Illustrators. They have, it's a nonprofit, an NGO. It's not a union, but the idea of having an association is really wonderful. And they have it in they have chapters in every locality, states, cities, and people who are interested, they gather themselves, they either in a coffee shop or in a library. But because it is not very centralized, I mean, I don't have to go to a fancy city with a fancy ticket, and and of course there's membership, so that's how you can have a pool of money, and we can have those workshops on different scales. It doesn't have to be in the biggest book fair in the Arab world. It could be just a small part in my small city, and get to see who's interested and learn from each other. So if we can have that, I think this would be great. And honestly, I also want to hear from, mostly we talk to each other, writers, illustrators, publishers in those fairs or panels. But what I really miss is the input from teachers, from librarians. Tell me how my book is working. Does it work or does it not work? How do kids, because I don't have access to, for example, public schools in Egypt, which no one has access to. I can only visit a private school. So I could learn from maybe Taghreed's background in teaching, or maybe she has better access in her country going into schools. So these kinds of things could, I mean, I wish our conversation is kind of continuous, and so maybe having an association somewhere with a website where we have these one place to go to and build on past conversations and past experiences, because there are a lot of people working, but sort of in islands, they're not very connected, and there are universities and there are people, teaching and working, but we just don't know, and we keep talking about the same issues again and again as if they're being talked about for the first time. So That's my 2 cents.
So Susanne, actually, then I want to, so Hadil is talking about how books are received in classrooms, teachers and librarians, and some of your research was sort of really intensively looking at how 2 books were being read by some teenagers in Lebanon. Are there lessons from that that authors can take?
I think the primary lesson is, I mean, what I found from my experience is you can't always count on the teachers or the schools knowing. So from what I know from how publishers sell their books, a lot of them have people who go from school to school, you know, talking directly with Arabic language coordinators and teachers. And it'd be nicer if some of it was happening the other way, where people are, I mean, it's happening to some extent, but I think we need more of that. In terms, and also the way, I mean, this is based on my own experience when I was studying Arabic literature back in school, which is like more than 20 years ago, where it's about, you know, there's one proper interpretation for something. Even like, I remember once we were reading a short story by Lebanese author Marwan Abou, which we could have easily read by ourselves, but the teacher had to sort of go and explain everything, even though it was completely accessible. And we need to sort of get a new way of dealing with literature, where rather than the teacher talking all the time, explaining or giving one interpretation, where we open it up for them expressing their own opinions, which I think they really enjoyed expressing their own opinions. They also like working together in collaborative ways. So I think there's some work to be done with teachers for sure. And I mean, this school actually had a school library, which was already kind of impressive. But I don't think they had any young adult in it. They had some classic Arabic, which is also, I mean, it's also wonderful. That could definitely be somebody's path. We're not sort of posing, you know, young adult as to save us from all this boring literature, because that's not really the case. There's a lot of, you know, great literature for adults that they can enjoy as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I had a question from Hadil, and she had asked, what makes a book a good candidate for translation? Sometimes there are very good and successful books in Arabic that just don't work well in another language. And is any book translatable, or and especially for children, what makes a book work in translation? I'm going to aim this at Fatima.
Yes. From my experience, I have noticed that the West wants books that are related to our culture, to our history, and not any fun book that we write, because, well, they think their market is saturated with the best books. So at least with my experience with the Groundwood books in Canada, they translated Ibn Battuta, Ibn Sina, and Fatin. And all three, especially Ibn Battuta and Ibn Sina, you know, are historical figures from the Arab Islamic heritage, and that's what they're interested in. Same thing in Turkey. They were more open in Turkey, and they translated a series of a little boy that I wrote with Kalimat, 3 or 4 books. In school, at the hospital, and when I went there and I toured the schools in Turkey, the publisher who translated them told me this is the first time that we finally can translate cultural values that fit our values. So that was with Turkey, which was an exception. But in the West, in Belgium, in Canada, and in other languages, I think the West wants to reinforce the stereotype they have from our cultures. I don't know if Susanne has another opinion, but this is so far my view.
Yeah, if I just butt in a bit, because my supervisor, she gives a course called Text for Diversity, and I give a particular session on Arabic literature, but sort of like Arabic literature that's available in English. So I give them 2 lists of recommended books. One of them, I think, for teenagers, one of them for picture books. And I'm like, this means that these are books either translated into English or written to begin with in English. Are there common themes? And there are common themes, of course. Family, war, a lot of interest in girlhood. And I think they do kind of feed into stereotypes about, you know, about the East and the Arab world. There is some truth to it, quite a lot of truth to that.
But we can try to change that and interest them in more fun, exciting books. I'm going to, because we have a lot of questions, I'm going to move to the questions, but we can continue to ask each other questions as time goes on. Yasmin is saying hello to everyone, and she's asking, what would you write about if there were no boundaries? And what would you do with an unlimited grant? Yasmin has some unlimited money there at AUC, apparently. Taghreed, what about you? What would you write about if there were no boundaries? And what would you do if you had an unlimited grant? You had $1 billion.
Oh my God, what a question, Yasmin. All right, if I could write about anything, I don't know if I would change that. I think I have boundaries. I have my own boundaries. It's not that the boundaries, but I have boundaries and society's boundaries. So I will not go wild if I have no boundaries at all. I think I'll stick to what I think is right and not right, and how much. And because when I'm writing, I'm also thinking with the society, with the reader, my reader, and I have to be sensitive to how my reader receives the message that I'm sending or the story. So Yasmin, I'm afraid I will not go, use that out of, but I'm sure I will relax it a lot more about a lot of subjects. So a lot of the taboos that I don't believe in personally, I will, cross them. But other than that, it will be contained, but much more free. As for the money, the budget, I really don't know. It's like somebody asks you, if you have $1 million, what would you do? I think we'll publish a lot more books and try to make them accessible to many more people who can't afford these books. So that's what I would do with the money.
What about you, Hadil? What would you do? You would fill your books with curse words, or no, if there's no boundaries at all, and you have, Yasmin is giving out unlimited money, I heard.
Okay, well, I had a dream like years ago, and it was like, I want to travel and collect folk tales, just go from village to village and maybe bring my friends, and we just go and collect folk tales, listen to oral folk tales, and then come back and write them and compare them. So I've always had that fantasy. Maybe now we don't need it as much. I don't know if the world needs it, but I thought it would be fun. And of course, there's just hundreds of classics that I want to just revisit and play with, and have teams bring maybe classics into graphic novels and all that. So yeah, I would like that. And actually, one more thing about boundaries. Yeah, I think I would love to write a love story for young adults and see what happens. I mean, yeah, we need more. We need to talk more to talk about and not be afraid.
Fatima, you can answer that, and then I'm also gonna throw in another question from Hatim Fatiali, so that we get to a bunch of questions. And he wants to know, so where do people go to find good workshops to join? What to follow, what to look for? How do people know, other than stumbling on a link that somebody shared on Facebook?
Unfortunately, all the workshops are organized by private institutions, organizations, mainly in where I go is in Saudi and the United Arab Emirates, and they're not open to, I mean, you have to be there physically. So if you live in Morocco, you have to travel on your own expenses to Dubai, let's say, to take the workshop. That's why I am encouraging people who give workshops to start doing it online. I have a friend who is going to help me to develop a course online. So that's my dream now is to do that. And that course would be like a big workshop. You know, it will include lots of information about the field of children's literature. Yeah.
Can I just butt in here for a second? I mean, thank you for the question, Hatem. I think it's a really important question. And what would be ideal, you know, with all this pot of money, and this is something that Yasmin and I have been discussing, which is rather than just having one-shot workshops, what are sort of more long-term ways of supporting authors and illustrators? It could be, you know, a one-year course, it could be a mentorship program. And we're sort of talking about our history. Like, for example, we talk about all the illustrators affiliated with Dar al-Fatah al-Arabi and the enormous influence they had in sort of developing this new visual language. And they did it because it was a group of them, and they did it because they had a mentor, which is, you know, Hussein Bikar. This is something that Matil Shavd and Ismail Neshif has spoken about. And also with what was happening in Iraq, there was a government will and a government structure. And I think we do need something with this pot of money that Yasmin is distributing, where we can have something a bit more long-term, where it's not just about doing workshops sometimes with non-Arab trainers because they don't speak our language. They don't understand our visual heritage. So the individual author and illustrator has to make a lot of effort to sort of inject this. And we do have this sort of mentorship links. We need something, we need those. We don't really have them at the moment. Or they're happening very much, you know, one-on-one, and we need something more sustainable.
Okay, I have two questions. Two people who are asking kind of a similar question that I'm going to shoot right back at Susanne, which is they're asking, why isn't there YA in Arabic? Now, I would say, well, I'm hoping that Susanne will say, what are you talking about? It's discoverability that's the problem, not the lack of YA.
Sorry, I have to agree with you that there is some YA. There could be a lot more of it. And I think one reason we feel there isn't a lot of it because it's being published in different countries. So, and one issue is definitely distribution. And I think in the end, I'm a materialist, and coming from a cultural studies approach, it is, you know, it's the market's stupid, which means that they're having trouble selling these books. And publishers, this is Shireen Traidia did her PhD on marketing Lebanese books, and she's also sharing her experience as a publisher. Publishers do worry about selling these books because they're not so well integrated in the curriculum, even though that's, you know, double-edged sword, it's integration in the curriculum. And young people are not necessarily buying these books. They might be buying books for adults. They're buying all this very popular genre fiction. So I think it's that. So either connecting it better to schools and finding a way, some way of appealing directly to young people. I mean, and there's something that Fatima said when I interviewed her for my thesis, is that the things that mark out this particular period of your life are exactly the things you're not allowed to talk about, especially when it's the school that's buying. So I think that's, you know, all these different things enter into it.
Right, and when you say genre, it's horror, romance,
horror, police, sort of like detective fiction, romance for sure. Yeah.
So we have a question from Anoha Forster. By playing with language, did this take you into writing in Amiya? Do you think we should write toddler books in Amiya? And what do you think about the language used for YA?
Is this for me? Okay. Okay, the Amiya issue is 100 years old. When I first started writing, I wrote my first 4 books in Amiya, but nobody published them for me. So I translated them to Fusha and I published them. And my theory was children under 6 years old, their mother tongue is Amiya. So why do we have to write in Fusha and then let the reader translate it to the child? I mean, there's no mother who reads the Fusha to the children. They translate it to Arabic, to Amiya. So my theory was that we should do that, but then nobody accepted to publish in Amiya. that's why I created a very simplistic language in Fusha that's very close to Ammiya. Let's say if there is the word qafaza means jump and natta means jump. So the child uses natta, I'm going to use natta. Same thing with basa, to kiss. It's qabbala or basa. Basa is in the dictionary, so I will use that. Lately I self-published, since no one ever accepted to publish in Ammiya. I self-published a book a couple of months ago. It's called Urs Bladi, and it's about the revolution we're having here in Lebanon. It's an Ammiya, and unfortunately it came at the wrong time. You know, we're locked down, we have, you know, all kinds of crises in Lebanon. So it's not, I mean, it's in some bookstores, but I haven't had the chance to tour it into schools, or, and that's another problem. Schools will not order it and let their children have it, even preschool, because it's an Ammiya. So it's a big issue, and if I had the money that Yasmin is offering, I will publish. I have a long list of toddler books that I have written, 2 series, I think, each of 5 books in Ammiya, and they're sitting in one file in my computer, and they're waiting for, you know, for the right moment to be published. So I really want to do that, and we'll see if it will happen one day.
Hopefully. So I just have a reminder from Ruth to explain very briefly that Ammiya is a spoken Arabic that differs from country to country, region to region, and Fusha is sort of a shared Arabic. Although I learned from Susanne's PhD thesis that students can be very sensitive to this as well, and that sometimes there's an over interpretation of something as Ammiya as when it is actually Fusha.
Yeah, can I say something? Okay, I agree with Fatima that this is a problem, especially with schools, so they refuse anything that has Ammiya. And I face the same thing with my novels, the young adult novels. Although I have some dialogue in, it's not all in Ammiya, but some dialogue is in Ammiya. I use that. And I got questioned about that by schools, and also like Fatima, I try to use very simple, straightforward language so that it will be appealing to the age group, even to the young adult group who don't really like to read long stories. So I had to, some of them would say, why is your book in Ammiya? They would think that all the novel is in Ammiya, whereas it was just like 2 or 3 sentences in a chapter. So it's still a problem, but right now there are many publishers who are, there are 2 actually in Egypt. One is an Egyptian, Rihan, in the US, who have already published books and in Ammiya and taken that step. And they seem to have gotten some success. Of course, they were attacked by a lot of you know, people who really resent that. But my personal opinion as a writer, as a publisher, is that it's another kind of diversity and another kind of choice for kids. Why not? Why not have both? If parents would like to buy Ammiya, it's like saying only eat vegetables, don't eat chocolate or ice cream or cake, because that's not good for you. And with books, it's the same. You can get an Ammiya book if that gives you pleasure, or one in classical.
Can I add something? The problem with Ammiya is Ammiya in Lebanon is not the Ammiya of Morocco, is not the Ammiya of Egypt. So that's one issue, whereas the classical Arabic will be distributed in all of the 22 Arab countries, and it will be understood. Another problem is, even if I'm writing in Lebanon for the Lebanese, my dialect in Beirut is totally different from Hasbaya. Where are you from, Hasbaya, Susanne? from the south, you know. So how do you write a word that is sometimes the alif is pronounced o or a or e, and it depends. In some towns they pronounce the kaf, in other towns they don't.
They don't.
So there is no one unified way. Do you only write the sounds that you hear, or if you want to write minha, you are minna, or just minha, you add the ha. So that's why I think that's more of an issue than of just writing Amniya, I think. There's not one.
There has been like this experiment that's been done. The publisher should publish the same book in different dialects, like it's the same book in Egyptian, in Lebanese, in Jolib. That's too much, really.
Yeah,
I agree. I had the same experience when I had to transcribe the Ahazij, which are the Arabic nursery rhymes written already or sung in colloquial. And I had to make my own rules. Should I say ah, or should I write this word as in classical and the other one? And then, you know, I agree with you, Fatima. It's not easy.
I think we have time for one more question. So I would like to take a question from somebody who hasn't been heard from yet. Ghaida Amin, she says, how do you as a writer manage maneuvering around taboo issues, given what's considered controversial? How do you reinforce healthy ideas about things such as relationships or love, as Hadil mentioned? But I'd like to take it first to Fatima because she wrote about, for instance, a relationship. She's written about relationships in her.
Yes. But as Taghreed said, we self-censor ourselves as writers. The thing is, of course, when you write for young adults, you have to write about issues they live, about love, relationship, changes in the body. I mean, we hesitate 100 times before writing about a girl who has her period in the classroom, let's say, and the blood is on the chair. You don't. Whereas they read about these things in foreign languages, the same kids, the parents allow them to read whatever they want in English or French. Yes. But if you write the same thing in Arabic, okay, it's not allowed because an Arab person is writing it in the Arabic language. Also about not only about sexual issues or relationships, revolting against power, you know, political issues. We are oppressed in our countries, and we can't express ourselves freely in many issues. So how do I end it? Like with Fatima, there's a love story, and the best they could do in the car, he puts his hand on her lap, and Cappuccino, I had an interview with the students a couple of days ago in Dubai, and he asked me, are they lovers, Anas and Lina? And I said, I wish I made them best friends, but I didn't go once to make them lovers, because then I wanted to go, you know, all the way, and I couldn't because the book has in all of the Arab countries, so I didn't. So sometimes you just put it behind your back and let the reader imagine what they want to imagine. But I hope one day we can break all these taboos and talk about teenage pregnancy, about drug abuse, you know, about revolting against the leaders that are corrupt. We have to deal with these issues one day.
Thank you so much. And I must say, I did imagine, I sort of imagined remembering that there was a kiss in Fatima, but I know there really wasn't. But so the last question is, somebody wants to know how to stay, I know time's up, but somebody wants to know how to stay connected with the speakers. So I will try to put, Hadil, Fatima have websites, Taghreed, we can link to Salwa books. Susanne, you can tell me how you might like people to be able to be in touch with you, and we'll have
Twitter. On Twitter.
Yeah, we can add Suzanne's Twitter handle. So I'm sorry, but Mohini tells me the time is finished. So thank you everybody so much for coming. This was fantastic. And you can find it all on YouTube very soon. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.